A friend of mine and author Jordan Tyler had told me this crazy and very strange story that happened to him one night while he was staying at this cabin in Arizona. Take it as you want, but this is a very true story. And if you knew Jordan, you would know that he's not the type to just make up stuff to pass it off as something real. Today, I will be telling the truly terrifying story of a possession case that Jordan experienced with his friend inside this cabin in the middle of nowhere. Hi, I'm Zach and welcome to Rooted Expeditions. If you're a fan of the abandoned historical and strange events and locations, then you're in the right place. Hit that thumbs up and let's dive right into today's story. One night in this cabin in Arizona, Jordan was with another person. And for the story, we will call her Melissa. And she ended up passing out from drinking too much. Part of the reason they were out there to begin with was to recover from alcoholism, and Jordan was sober and ended up helping her through this process. Melissa drank about 1.5 liters of whiskey that night by herself alone. Jameson Irish whiskey, which if you know, that's the real hard stuff. So with drinking that much, she ended up passing out in this recliner that was inside this cabin. That night, Jordan was reading some very dark stuff, so he decided to take a break from his new book that he was working on, and Jordan was reading this book by Ed and Lorraine Warren. It was about possession, and around midnight, that's when things seemed to take a different turn. In fact, things started to get stranger than hell, as he would put it. All of a sudden, he started to feel like someone was watching him, like someone was standing there at a distance watching him. But when he would look around to see who it was, expecting to see his friend Melissa standing there, he noticed that Melissa was laying down passed out from all the drinking that she did. That's when he noticed out of the corner of his eye some sort of movement that grabbed his attention, something outside the window that was right beside him. And what he saw was truly terrifying. He saw these white pale faces with dark spots for eyes and a black gaping hole for their silent screaming mouths. He would say that there were dozens of them. Seeing this, his heart just dropped. A sense of uneasy fear came over his body, and he immediately looked back across the room to these glass double doors that separated these two rooms, and Melissa was sleeping in front of those doors in this recliner. And when he looked at the double doors in the glass, he could see those white faces. Then he looked to his right where this small kitchen window was, and then the same thing. Those white, pale faces with black features where their eyes and mouths should be. Now, this is where things take a scary turn. As Jordan was on edge with everything going on, he noticed Melissa started to move. He looked at her, and when he did, he saw her lift her head up from the recliner, and she opened her eyes and she looked at him and formed a massive and sinister grin. His heart at this point is thumping so hard that he could hear his throbbing heartbeat in his eardrums. At this point, several things started to go through his mind. He was a pretty quick thinker on the spot, so he quickly said and teased her to make light of the moment. "Hey, you passed out on me, and you left me up alone." But she didn't respond to this statement directly. Instead, she just smiles even more with this terrifying grin. I'm talking about the Joker from The Dark Knight on steroids type of crazy smile. She finally spoke and said in a deep voice, "I'm not your friend." And just before Jordan could ask who she was, she spoke again and said, "You know who I am." And then started to laugh with this ungodly laugh. All the faces that were in the windows were still there, silently screaming at him. Jordan would state that he felt that they wanted to desperately get inside that cabin and to get inside of him. He would also state that it was the craziest feeling that he has ever felt. It was like zombies were trying to break through the windows and doors and to attack him. Except these things, souls or demons, wanted him, to possess him, to feed on his soul. Whatever these things were, they wanted to hurt him, and that's for sure. maybe they were feeding off of his fear. I don't know. Okay, moving on. Jordan, with no doubt, would say that he was definitely terrified for a few minutes that night. When Melissa spoke to him, it wasn't in her normal voice. Her voice was deeper yet higher than her normal voice. It was really strange, and Jordan would state that it was pretty scary. She just sat there looking at him with her face looking a bit darker and not the look of Melissa. She would stare with these blank eyes and this giant grin on her face. She kept talking too and said some things that Jordan knew that she had no way of knowing. Personal stuff about him from years ago. That's when he stopped being afraid, and in fact, he ended up getting mad at this situation. He stood up and made the sign of his cross with his pointer fingers, and he started walking towards her, telling her, "You are not welcome here, and you need to leave Melissa's body at once." He did this with the authority, trying at the same time to keep his composure. Jordan would say that he knew from his previous experiences that he had in the past that they, or whatever they are powerless in certain situations, like calling on the name of Jesus Christ and using holy water. He didn't have any holy water with him, but he did invoke the authority of Jesus Christ, at the same time ignoring everything that this thing was saying to him. Again, he would command this thing to leave Melissa and the cabin at once in Jesus' name. And as he did this, this thing would laugh at him from inside of Melissa, and then in an instant went from laughing at him to immediately screaming as like it was being tortured or terrified. Jordan would repeat himself again and again, pressing his fingers against her forehead, and then this thing immediately fell silent. Jordan then would close his eyes and envision himself being this beacon of light. In his mind, he visualized this light expanding across the room and throughout the cabin and even over his friend Melissa. He would then focus even harder to try to make this light brighter and brighter, at the same time reciting the Lord's Prayer in his mind. He could feel this light expand all the way through the cabin, over his friend, and even through the entire 15 acres that this cabin sat on. Then, after this great and overwhelming peace filled the room, Jordan opened his eyes and looked around to find Melissa sleeping and nothing in the windows or doors of the cabin. After that incident, it took him a bit to close his eyes to go to sleep that night. Heck, that would take me a little bit too, but it just happened. That's some crazy stuff. All right, moving on. He would just lay there thinking about what just unfolded. As soon as the early morning hours and the sun just started to creep up and illuminate the land, he was able to finally fall asleep. When they finally woke up, Jordan would confront Melissa of the events that unfolded the night before. She would have zero recollection of what happened, and she didn't even remember waking up. She didn't even remember passing out from drinking so much. Jordan ended up moving from that cabin, and it has been sold since, and there's no telling of what incidents have happened there at the cabin since. Credit and shout out for this story goes to author Jordan Tyler. Thank you, man. Hit that thumbs up. Peace. I love you. And as always, God bless.